Hey, Joy, I really appreciate you making time, especially with your fight being so close. I really appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
No problem. I wanted to start by asking you, this is going to be your second consecutive fighter that you're fighting that's undefeated. And sometimes the narrative is that an undefeated fighter, mentally, they have more resolve and it's a little bit more difficult to fight them because they don't know how to lose. I'm just wondering, when you fought Salgado, did you see any of that additional fortitude in him, at least early on?
Um, I feel like Salgado broke a little quicker than what maybe I expected him to. He got frustrated. I could kind of see it in his face. Um, I saw that frustration creep in and him kind of lose hope. And I feel like maybe wasn't as confident as he made it out to that he was coming into the fight. And I feel like yeah, I feel like that's what I saw.
All right. So as far as the second half of the fight, I know it's around about the eighth, seventh rounds when he was really moving a lot, really trying to stay away from you and not engage. And I remember you kind of tapped gloves with him at the end of one of those rounds. Was that you showing just a little bit of mercy on him, kind of knowing, like you said, that he had broke a little bit earlier on and still just trying to be a little cautious? I almost felt like you kind of let him kind of coast to the end of the fight.
No, you know what? I knew that maybe in the back of my mind, I knew that there was a big fight around the corner. All I had to do was get through that fight. So it definitely wasn't merciful, but that was something that I went back to the drawing board on and was like, that can't happen again, because that was something that I felt like I left that on the table. But in the back of my mind, I felt like I knew with this win that there was going to be a much bigger fight right around the corner, and then that is what happened. But I felt like I could have gotten him out of there as well. So that was uh that was the reason I believe for that.
Got it. Now, one thing that's really impressed me about you is that you mentioned that you pay attention to the rankings. A lot of fighters don't do that. It's just, whoever you put in the ring with me, I'm going to fight. You recognize that Jesus Ramos, I think he's number seven with the WBC, I think number 10 with the WBO. So
Yep.
this would shoot you right up there,
Yep.
beating him. But
Yep.
it also made me wonder, all the sanctioning bodies are different. Do you kind of have a preference as far as your pathway? Do you think the WBC is easier? WBO is easier? I'm just wondering what you think from a fighter's end.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know which one would be easier per se. And right now, I'm not really thinking about that because there's one guy that has all the belts. So I'm not really thinking too much about one particular one. Ever since I was a kid, I've always kind of dreamed about fighting for the WBC first. I always, I felt like that was kind of an iconic belt, and Floyd was always carrying the WBC belts, and all the great fighters. So I've always wanted to fight for the WBC, but right now I haven't necessarily been thinking about that just because Charlo's got all the belts. So it's kind of become a dream to fight for all the belts at one time. That would be ideal.
Got it. Got it. And on that end, also with Ramos, he's 19-0, 15 KOs. If you
Yeah,
look at his record, I know a lot of people think, oh, he must be a knockout artist. But one thing
yeah.
I noticed is last four fights, three of them went the distance, and he is coming up in weight. Obviously, you still need to be concerned with any fighter that you face, but do you feel that you're going to have the strength and power advantage in the fight?
I won't be able to say the power advantage until I get in there and feel his power. As far as strength physically, I feel like I'll be bigger, but again, I at the end of the day, I'll have to feel that out when I get in there because we really don't know. I can't really determine a fighter's strength for sure until I get in there and feel it myself. So we'll see.
Got it. Got it. One thing that stood out to me about you that I think most other fighters can't say is that you're an actual hunter outside of the ring.
Yeah,
And just to let people know, not a trophy hunter, an actual hunter that, takes his own food, processes it.
absolutely,
So I just want to make that
absolutely.
clear to anybody that's watching. But I feel like that mentality as a hunter is going to influence how you approach fighting in the ring, especially knowing, the importance of life and everything, sustaining your family and all that. How does that hunter mentality transfer into the ring as a fighter for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's very similar. We go out. It's a brutal sport, and that's what I think is kind of crazy to me when people are pretty hateful on my content about hunting and things like that because you know given the opportunity, any one of my opponents and me myself, we're gonna go out there to do extreme damage to the other. And you know um and that is to feed our family. That's what that's for. You know, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to go out there and, you know, brutally knock anybody unconscious to the point where they wake up in the hospital. But if I have to do that to feed my family, I will. And I feel like that's something that's lost, because that's the way that we all survived. That's the reason why we're all here. But people, you know, you go to a boxing event and someone will have their eyes roll back to the back of their head. They'll be laying on the ground, not knowing if they're going to wake up. And you'll see the whole crowd will be just loving every minute of it for the most part. You know, there's some exceptions, but I've been in a lot of boxing events and people are just cheering that brutality on, and they love it. That's what they paid for. But then there's not that same mentality when it comes to taking a life to put food in my body and in my family's body. That then, you know, that's too brutal. So I think that's crazy because of the profession that I'm in, that people don't see what you just said, that resemblance of the reasoning behind it. And it's a brutal world, but at the same time, it's a beautiful thing, and it's the way the world goes around, and that's what we have to do to feed our family. So, yeah, I'd say that it definitely has some parallels.
Absolutely. Now, one of the last events I was at, or at least last year, was Deontay Wilder's last fight, and Vito Mielnicki, he was on the undercard, and I actually spoke with him about potentially fighting you. He's like, "Oh, I think that fight is 100% going to happen. It's going to happen." I think he even said it was going to happen next. But now, in your case, you're kind of leapfrogging him a little bit with your last two fights. You know, these are undefeated fighters, and winning this fight against Ramos, that's really going to put you in contention for being ranked as a top 5 fighter. So do you still think that fight would be feasible, or do you think a win against Ramos kind of pushes you a little too further ahead where he's going to have to catch up with you to make that fight kind of feasible in the future?
Yeah, you know, I don't count anything out. I'm going to the best fight that I can possibly get after this fight. That gets me close to the title. Now, say that I can't get a fight like that right away, you know, in my next fight, and Vito wants to fight, and we can definitely fight. We can fight in the next fight, because I'm just going to take the most dangerous fight. And if I can't get one of those top 5 fights, you know, things happen. You know, if I can't get it in time, or I want to get back in the ring quicker, or things like that, and that's something that PBC is open to, and that's what they want to do, and Vito's open to it, we can definitely make it happen. And I feel like, you know, Ramos is ahead of me in the rankings, and we're fighting. So, you know, why wouldn't I fight him? I would. And really, that would just be like, I beat Ramos, and then I beat, you know, Vito. Then it's like, yeah, I'm definitely the best young guy in PBC. So there's a feather in my cap a little bit in that way. But the most important thing to me is the belt. So we won't be fighting if I'm able to get a top 5 fight after this fight. You know, that's one thing. But it'll definitely happen eventually, for sure. We're in the same weight class. As long as we're in the same weight class. You know, I like him. I like his dad. We're definitely been very cool throughout the amateurs and things like that. They've always treated us well. But we're in the same weight class. So if we can do it and have a great fight, then we're definitely going to do that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, my last question for you would be, assuming that you're going to beat Jesus Ramos, you know, you'll be able to relax after the fight and watch the rest of the card. So I do got to ask you, who do you think wins that main event with Caleb Plant and David Benavidez? Most fighters I've spoken to kind of lean towards Benavidez if he keeps his head cool. But I want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I have a hard time picking for that fight. I really do. I have a hard time, because I think it comes down to so much. It's one of those 50-50 fights that it comes down to who implements their game plan better on the night. You know, I think that if they fought several times, I think that maybe you get a couple different winners. I feel like, you know, just it comes down to what happens on that night, who comes in with a better game plan and who comes in better condition. I think that Caleb, if he can box for 12 rounds and stay focused and not get caught, and I think he can win the fight, just based on the fact that I saw Anthony Jarrell able to win some rounds with his jab against Benavidez until he got caught and he got tired and things. But then Benavidez is looking like a monster. So really, it just comes down to who does better on the night.
Absolutely. Well, Joey, I thank you so much for your time, and best of luck against Jesus Ramos next week. I think y'all also be out there as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing you.
Yep, it was great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Andrew.